Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I want to talk a little bit about Star Trek Adventures. This is a system that I've had for a little over a year now, although there's just been so much other stuff that's sort of come at me that I haven't had as much time to spend reading through this as I would like, but I still wanted to make a video on this. I've actually tried recording videos several times, including just earlier this evening. This is like my third attempt at at the video that I'm recording today, and I've tried like 4 or 5 other times, and there was just something that always kind of came up or that happened that just made it very difficult to actually record anything or to get the video out the way that I wanted it to. So I'm going to try my best to finally get this one out because I think this is a really cool role-playing game. And I mean, I am biased because I'm a huge Star Trek fan to begin with. My wife and I just finished wrapping up our watching of the series Enterprise, and we've already watched Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager before that. And we're going to move on to the movies, like the original series movies. And we did watch First Contact already because I wanted to show her that movie before getting to a certain point in Star Trek Voyager, because stuff that happens in Voyager references the movie. And Enterprise, there's something in Enterprise that references the First Contact movie as well. So I wanted her to have like that sort of frame reference in order to actually understand what was going on in those other series, or to be able to appreciate what's going on in those other series. But again, I'm not here to talk about the TV shows. I'm here to talk about the role-playing game. So this is put out by Modifus, or Modifus. I'm not good at pronouncing names, so I do apologize, but Modifus Entertainment. And they've put out some pretty cool stuff as well. A little while ago, I did an unboxing for the Skyrim, or like the Elder Scrolls tabletop like miniatures game. I believe they did that as well. I think they just put out the Fallout, like based on the Fallout video game series role-playing game. And they've got all kinds of stuff out there. They're a really cool company, and I recommend checking out their stuff. This isn't like, they didn't send me anything, like they're not sponsoring, they're not, this video has nothing to do with them sending me stuff. Everything that I have here are things that I purchased on my own, but I still want to talk about this because, like I said, I think it's a really great game. It uses the 2D20 system, and I'll go into a little bit of detail as to how that works, not comprehensively, because honestly, I haven't had the time, like I said, to read through everything yet, but I'm really enjoying what I've read so far, and I have at least a basic understanding of how to make, skill rolls or combat rolls and stuff like that. So, and again, I just want to talk about this system because I've wanted to talk about this system for a while, and it's just never gone well for me. I'm hoping that it works a little bit better here. One of the first things that I have to say about this book is the formatting. The layout is absolutely fantastic. And the artwork is really, really well done as well. Like, I was really impressed with the quality of the artwork in here. So to talk about like the formatting and the layout, so one of the things that you see here is it's laid out, each of the pages is sort of laid out to look like the display from like a comm panel that you might see on like the Next Generation era of shows. So like the Enterprise D, you might see like comm panels that sort of have this look to them, and they use that pretty much all throughout. Certain pages you'll have just sort of breakdowns of some of the different classes of ships, and these are again look like layouts that you might see on a panel in like engineering, and it's just really, really cool. I love the way that they lay out the books with that sort of approach to it. It also is really cool that a lot of the world building in this book isn't done through just sort of like standard, this is the location, or this is some of the events that have happened, and, just like little blurbs on it. They actually do a lot of world building through essentially what looks like log entries or intelligence reports from various factions operating within the Star Trek universe. So, for example, here we have an Obsidian Order report. There are reports by the Tal Shiar, their Starfleet intelligence. Then you get just personal logs from some of the different captains from the Star Trek series. It's just really cool that the way that they've, like I said, done that world building aspect to it through those like log entries or intelligence reports, or things like communications, just things along those lines. I really, really love that. Another cool thing about this particular RPG is that it actually allows or covers 3 distinct eras of gameplay, if for like different flavors of campaigns if you want to run them. So it does the NX Enterprise, so like the Star Trek Enterprise era with the Warp 5, ships where mankind is just sort of branching out into space, pre-United Federation of Planets. Like Starfleet exists, but the United Federation of Planets doesn't yet exist. You have like the Mako security, the different patches there. So you can cover that. There's also the original series. It covers that as well. So if you wanted to play a game using, the Constitution class, with Captain Kirk, like the 60s era or like the 70s animated series era, you can run campaigns based on that as well. And then you have like the Next Generation era with the Star Trek Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and then like some of the Next Generation cast movies that have come out. It doesn't really cover, at least in these books, it doesn't cover like the J.J. Abrams, the Kelvin timeline, nor does it cover things like obviously Discovery or Star Trek Picard, because at the time this was put out, I don't believe those programs were even announced, let alone actually out and on the air. And personally, I'm okay with that. I kind of like it covering sort of like the golden age of Star Trek. So you have the original series, the movie era, or the motion picture era. Then you have the Next Generation era. And then you finally have the underrated, in my opinion, highly underrated Star Trek Enterprise era, because that show is really, in my opinion, a lot better than I think people gave it credit for, especially season 3. Season 3 is what the Star Trek Voyager Year of Hell should have been. Like an entire season just showing the ship getting beaten to crap, showing the damage, the effects of everything that's going through. Really underrated series. And if I actually go to run a Star Trek Adventures role-playing game, I'm probably right now most inclined to set it in that era. So it's kind of cool that it covers all three of those. And like I said, you got some fantastic artwork there. You have the Enterprise C and, the battle where it, sort of led the Klingons to forging an alliance with Starfleet as it's defending these Klingon ships against the Romulan bird of prey. Just, again, really, really cool stuff here. References a lot. There's like a lot of references to stuff from the different series. One of the sidebars, for example, is called Yesterday's Enterprise, which was a really, that's the episode of Next Generation where we got to see the Enterprise C, and that sort of talks about like the different eras that you can do. So it references things. There's also some of these communications or log entries also directly reference some of the episodes. So again, there's just a lot of really cool stuff, and you even get some, neat little things like the different ranks and insignias for the different eras. Just again, overall, just really, really great stuff. And it makes for, like I said, a very interesting RPG system. Now, again, I want to talk about the 2D20 system a little bit. I said I'm not an authority on it at this point in time, but I just want to go over a little bit of the basics. So I've got the starter set, and I've got one of the pre-made characters right here. So what the 2D20 system is you make your roll, like whenever you have to make a check for anything, you get to roll 2D20s right off the bat. So you always get two 20-sided dice that you get to roll in order to see if you pass or fail the tests that you're trying to make. Now, the Game Master will set the difficulty, and the difficulty number can range from 0, meaning you normally don't need to make a roll, all the way up to a difficulty of 5, although in extreme circumstances they can go beyond that. When a roll is asked for, the Game Master will usually give you a combination of one of your attributes and one of the disciplines. So the attributes are control, daring, fitness, insight, presence, and reason. And the disciplines are command, con, security, engineering, science, and medicine. So let's just say, for example, you are trying to manually land a shuttlecraft. So you're trying to dock with a ship that maybe the stabilizers aren't working, so the ship's kind of like rotating in space, and you have to sort of match your rotation, and there's no tractor beams or anything, so you have to like dock the shuttlecraft manually. The Game Master may call for a control con roll. And what you would do is you would take your number in control, you would take your number in con, you would add those together, and that gives you the target number that you have to roll, either that number or below. This is a system where you want lower rolls instead of higher rolls, which is right up my alley because a lot of times when I roll, it tends to be really low. So this is something that might be beneficial to me. So with this character in particular, a control con roll would be 9 plus 3. So you add those together, it gives you a 12. If you roll a 2d20, any number that is 12 or less is counted as a success. And if you roll a natural 1, it counts as 2 successes. And if you roll a natural 20, then you actually get what's called a complication. Now, again, for higher difficulties, so if something has a difficulty of 3, 4, or 5, there are ways that you can get extra dice that you can roll. So if you're rolling a check and you roll more successes than are required, the extra successes carry over as what's called momentum. So you have points of momentum that you can use, and you can use those for a few different things, but the main thing I want to talk about using them for is to spend a point of momentum to get a third die that you can roll with your 2d20 already. And then if you wanted to get a second die, you would have to spend 2 points to get that second one, and they have to spend 3 points for a third one. You can only, I think, ever buy up to a maximum of 3 dice, so you can only roll like a maximum of 5. Other characters can also assist you, and depending on the computer or console that you're at, if you're making a roll for something like that, the ship itself might be able to assist you. So the shuttlecraft might have like a stabilization protocol or something like that that you can use that would give you an extra die to roll as well. So if you roll extra successes, you get to store momentum points, and you can use those later on. If you have you also have different focuses. So these focuses aren't necessarily tied to any of the attributes or disciplines. They're just things that your character is really good at. And if you have those, then you sort of, I believe you attach them to like the discipline number that you're rolling for, and if you roll that number or less, then you actually get 2 successes there without having it to be a natural 1. So let's just say that the character had pilot as a focus, or like shuttlecraft pilot as a focus. So for their con roll, where they have a number of 3, instead of them getting 2 successes on a natural 1, if they roll a 1, 2, or 3, they get a pair of successes instead. So that's sort of how that works. Again, if you roll a natural 20 or a number that the game master declares as being like in the complication range, it's normally just natural 20, but certain circumstances may call for it being like 19, 20, or 18, 19, or 20. But it's always something that you will know of before you make the roll. It creates a complication. So using the shuttlecraft landing example, you could end up having a situation where you accidentally like smash the port nacelle against the shuttle bay door. So you do land, you manage to land successfully, but now your shuttlecraft is damaged and you'll have to spend time repairing it in order to actually get off the ship that you just landed on. Or if you're firing with a weapon and a complication arises, then you may overload the power cell. There's all kinds of different things that can happen. But the cool thing about stuff like complications or advantages, because there's also situations where you can roll the 6-sided dice, and if you get like the Starfleet logo, or a different, like I think a 5 or a 6 on just a regular 6-sided die, you can get what's called an advantage. And the cool thing about like setbacks and advantages is that they're not defined strictly. So it's sort of a collaborative thing where, if the players have an advantage, they could describe what that advantage would be, or the game master can describe what the complication is. So, and it's something that they can sort of, collaborate on and come up with something that makes sense. So it's really cool. I love the fact that there's sort of that potential for back and forth, and it makes each roll interesting in that like the results can have sort of like a very strong narrative effect, and I really love that. I think that that's a really cool thing to have overall. There's also something I need to mention as well called threat in this game. So threat is like a pool of points that the game master has that they can hold on to make things more difficult for the player characters later. Typically speaking, a game master will start with a number of threat points equal to 2 points per player at the table. So if you have 3 players at your table, the game master will usually start off with 6 different, well, sorry, not different, but 6 threat points. And you can also generate threat in several different ways as you go through the game. So let's just say, for example, you make a skill check and you roll a natural 20 on one of your 20-sided dice. The game master may decide that rather than having a complication take place, they simply just get to add 2 points of threat to their pool that they can do something with later. So let's just say again, with the shuttlecraft docking, the game master doesn't necessarily want to damage the shuttle or cut the players off from escape if things go, horribly awry. So instead, he may just say that, so you rolled a complication, nothing happens yet, I'm just going to take the 2 threat and, we can weave that into the story later. Another way to buy extra dice if you don't have momentum to spend from extra successes that you rolled in previous checks, you can buy extra dice by giving the game master points of threat. And it works on the same system. So if you want to buy 1 extra d20 to roll, and add to your pool, then you can grant the DM, or the game master, the GM, 1 threat. If you want to get 2, then you give them an additional 2. So it would be 1 for the first die and then 2 for the second die, so 3 points total. And if you wanted to buy 3 dice, because let's just say the difficulty for the check that you're making is like a difficulty 5, and it's a very important roll, like a life or death sort of situation, then you may end up giving the game master a full 6 threat, 1 for the first die, 2 for the second die, 3 for the third die, in order to make that roll. So, but threat can be used in a few different ways. So, for example, I believe you can use it just to simply add a complication. You can use it to increase the difficulty of a particular task. So if something has a difficulty of like 1 or 2, you may spend points of threat as the game master to increase that by 1 or 2 or however many points of threat you want to pump into it in order to buy extra difficulty. Or you can use it to add reinforcements to combat encounters. So in this game you have like just sort of your standard NPCs, which I'll just try to get to somewhere here if I can find it easily. So that is Starship Combat. Here we go. So you'll have like just sort of minor NPCs, and to add an extra minor NPC, 1 point of threat will get you an extra minor NPC. So if you wanted to add 3 extra minor NPCs, then you could just spend 3 threat to add 3 minor NPCs to that combat. However, there are also notable NPCs or major NPCs, and they cost, I think it's 2 or 3 points per. So, if you wanted to add much more difficult enemies to the fight, then you would have to spend obviously more threat in order to do that. But you can definitely beef up encounters if you decided to by spending threat. If you get into Starship Combat, you can also add extra ships into the combat as well. And ships have a stat called scale, and scale is sort of a rough determination of like the ship's size, for example. So I want to say that the Galaxy class Enterprise, I want to say that has a scale of 6 or 7. So if you wanted to add an extra ship to Starship Combat, then you have to spend a number of threat equal to the scale of the ship that you're adding. So if you're adding like a Romulan Warbird, which has a scale of, again, 6 or 7, you'd have to spend 6 or 7 points to add that extra Romulan Warbird. So again, it's kind of neat that, the encounters, even if you're running like a published adventure, just using threat, you can sort of modify and change things as well. So like nothing is necessarily just as static. So 2 people going through the same scenario may have vastly different experiences when it comes to some of the combats. So like one group may go through and everything's just sort of standard. However, their difficulties were sometimes harder to succeed on their checks. or there were more complications that ended up being thrown at them as they were going through it, or another group might just have larger pools of enemies that they had to go through. So, like I said, I love sort of the flexibility of that system. I think that it is really, really cool. So, if you're into sci-fi, especially if you're a fan of Star Trek, I do really recommend picking this RPG up. And one of the best ways to sort of get into it would be with that starter set. So I've done a video unboxing the starter set before. I'm not going to go through its contents here, although I did show you like an example of the character, and these are the dice that come with it. But the really cool thing about the starter set is just the adventures themselves. I'm not going to spoil too much here. But it actually touches on some things that are kind of obscure, or plot points that, existed very briefly and then just never really got picked up on again, or were only mentioned sort of in passing. So there's like 3 different scenarios, but they're all sort of interconnected. But the first one has the player characters, like their ship discovering or answering a distress call of, I believe it's an Oberth class, because if you know Star Trek, you know that the Oberth class is sort of the paper mache of, starships, where something always goes wrong with them. But it was a ship that was testing an experimental engine design to get around the Warp 5 limitations set by Starfleet because of the damage to subspace that high warp and frequent high warp travel was causing. So that was a plot thread from The Next Generation that got mentioned once or twice, but never really became a serious thing because it would limit, it would create situations where, well, we just can't get there, right? So they were pretty much always breaking the Warp 5 limit. And you had like the nacelles on Voyager, the ones that sort of angle up when the ship's about to go to warp, but are otherwise sort of flat. I believe that configuration was done as a way of limiting the damage that would be caused by the nacelles and allow them to travel beyond Warp 5. So, but that's something that's included in this adventure. And then you also have some creatures from some of the early Next Generation episodes that, make for a very cool adventure, like, enemy idea that, we're only in the show for like an episode. So it kind of covers some really obscure stuff, but it's a great set. It gives you some really cool characters. You get to be, the bridge crew, or the senior officers of a Galaxy class starship. And, who doesn't want to captain or be, the crew members of a Galaxy class starship. So really, again, really, really cool stuff. I love this system. If you're a Star Trek fan or a science fiction fan, I do recommend picking this up. Like I said, starter set is a great way to get into it. But if you want to get a little deeper into it, there are some source books. I don't have a lot of them, unfortunately, at this time. And there were 7 that I really want to get, and I have 3 of them, and I just haven't been able to pick up any of the other ones yet. But they have source books for the different divisions that you can have in Starfleet, which are usually denoted by the different uniform colors. So you have like the sciences, which are like the blue uniforms. You have operations, which is like engineering, security. Those are like the yellow uniforms. And then you have command, which are the red uniforms, if you're in the Next Generation era, and it's the red and yellow ones are flipped if you're in the NX Enterprise era or the original series era. So you have those 3 source books, which unfortunately I don't have, but they also have source books based on the 4 quadrants of the Milky Way galaxy. And I have the Alpha Quadrant book, the Beta Quadrant book, which honestly, I wasn't really aware when watching the shows that Earth and Vulcan, and I want to say Romulus? Oh no, Andoria. So Andoria, Earth, and Vulcan are actually in the Beta Quadrant and not the Alpha Quadrant. I just always assumed that the Alpha Quadrant was where Earth was, because, why wouldn't it be? It's Earth, right? But no, it's actually in the Beta Quadrant, which is something, like I said, I wasn't fully aware of. I was not able to get the Gamma Quadrant book. The store that I've been able to get these from, it was out of stock, and they've just never gotten it back in stock. But I do have the Delta Quadrant book, which I picked up as my wife and I were going through and watching Star Trek Voyager, because it was like, oh, I kind of want to run a game set in the Delta Quadrant, and this is the one that has a lot of stuff involving the Borg. and the Borg is still my favorite, Star Trek villains of all time. Even though after the Next Generation and after First Contact, they weren't handled the best. Anyway, I'm not going to spoil anything for the TV shows, but yeah, I just again really loved. I actually really enjoyed watching, Voyager, and it's like I want to get the Delta Quadrant book now. Like that was one of the ones. It's like, okay, well I'm okay with not having that because the Kazon, yeah, stuff like that. But it's like, oh, the Borg though. So there's that. The Gamma Quadrant book would have a heavy focus on the Dominion, which again, unfortunately, I don't have that book. I'm hoping to find it, but it's just never been restocked by the store I've been able to get this from. And yeah, the Beta Quadrant has like, Vulcans, Romulans, and then the Alpha Quadrant sort of has, like the Deep Space Nine stuff with Bajor and Cardassia. And I guess the Klingons, the Klingon Empire, I guess, is in the Alpha Quadrant as well. But anyway, really, really cool stuff. It's a great system, and I really want to try this out. Like I said, I'm a huge Trek fan, and yeah, this was something, like I said, I've had it for a while. I unfortunately just haven't had as much time to dedicate to really, hunkering down and going through the entire system yet. Like the biggest thing that I need to figure out right now is, ship combat, which I think is pretty much the same as regular combat. So that shouldn't be, too much of a thing. For regular combat, the characters have stress points, and they sort of act as hit points. If their stress gets reduced to 0, then they're sort of unconscious, or they, could be in a situation where they risk dying. And yeah, again, just really, really awesome stuff. So yeah, check it out. If you are into science fiction, like I said, this is definitely a great system to check out. I love the 2D20 system. I love the way that, like I said, the dice rolls can create story elements of, like complications or advantages for the players against the game master. So I think there's just a lot of really cool stuff in it. I love the rolling low because I tend to do that anyway. The difficulty number, so a lot of stuff is just sort of collaborative, and I think it's a really great system. So yeah, there you go. If you want to see a complete flip through of any of these books, let me know in the comments below. It might be a little while before I can get to it, but I would be more than happy to do that. And like I said, I just want to raise awareness of this really cool role-playing game because I think it deserves more of a spotlight than it really gets. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. If you've picked up Star Trek Adventures, let me know some of the adventures you've gone on. What are some of the things you've encountered? What are some of the stories you've played through? Did you go through the starter set? Did you go through like the adventure anthology collection books, like These Are the Voyages, or anything like that? What era do you tend to play in? Let me know that stuff in the comments below. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Take care.